Ahoy, and welcome in to another exciting episode of Not Allowed to Die, your podcast about mental health, where I, Dan Magler, social worker and life enthusiast, answer your questions about mental health. Alongside me, as always, is Mariska, the three-toothed Patterdale Terrier, and you might hear her licking her paws in the background. We just got back from a walk, and we know when you're rating and reviewing the podcast, she has to lick her paws a lot less. So let's make sure we rate, review, and give those 5-star reviews. And if you want to give a couple words, we might read your review on the podcast. As always, this podcast is brought to you to try to bring attention to Pause for Patrick. So if you or someone you know is a young person struggling with mental health issues and could benefit from an emotional support animal, go to pauseforpatrick.org and check it out, whether you want to be a volunteer or could benefit from an emotional support animal yourself. So Mariska and I are really excited to have the guest that we have tonight. Eric Daddario is inspirational, not just because of his journey as a hockey player who lost his vision in one eye and still went on to play high-level competitive hockey, but more because of how he's responded to a tragedy in his life. Eric lost his brother and has become a public speaker, particularly focusing on young people and student athletes, talking about mental health and the decisions that we make. So, Eric, thank you so much for being on the podcast tonight. And if you would, tell us a little bit about your story. We'd really appreciate that.
Yeah, Dan, thank you. I really appreciate you for having me on your podcast. So it starts, I'll start off live in Boston, Massachusetts, right outside of Boston. And around the 8th grade, my younger brother, Brendan, really started struggling with social anxiety. Was really concerned, nervous, afraid, thinking about what others will think about him, what they'll say, how they react if he says this, if he does that. And on the side of that, though, he's a great athlete, great soccer player, great basketball player, but he's really struggling with this social anxiety thing. And it just gets to the point where it takes his life over. And it's affecting him every single day. And when it gets to this point, he just thinks to himself, I don't want to live like this anymore. I don't want to go through this. I don't want to feel like this anymore. I'm sick of this. I just want to feel happy. I want to enjoy my life. Not knowing how to deal with what he's going through in a healthy way. Brendan's down the basement one night of our house, and he's going to the refrigerator. He sees a few beers. And immediately he says to himself, you know something? I'm going to have one of those beers. I'm going to have one of those beers because maybe that's what's going to help me get through what I'm going through. Maybe this is going to help make me feel better. So he reaches in that refrigerator. He opens one of the beers. He drinks it. And then he has another one. And then another one. And then another one. To the point now, all of a sudden, Brendan, he's drunk. And when he's drunk, he notices that all that pain, all that suffering, all that struggle he's been going through that's been affecting him every single day, it's gone. And he's just calm. He's relaxed and he's like, this is what I've been looking for. This is what I've been searching for. This is what I need. But then he eventually realizes the next day when he wakes up and he's not drunk, he doesn't have that feeling, that pain and suffering. It's right back in his life. So then he says to himself, all right, you want some of the beer, the alcohol? This isn't doing it. This isn't what's going to help me. So that's when he starts vaping and thinking, the weed, that's what's going to calm me down. That's what's going to help relax me, make me feel better. But just like the alcohol, it's the same thing. When he's in the moment and he's high, he feels good. But later, when that feeling wears off, again, that pain and suffering comes back. So this leads to him saying, okay, I'm going to try the pills. They're stronger. That's what will help me. And then he dives into the Oxycontin, the Xanax, the Percocet. And that leads to him using heroin by his junior year of high school, end of his junior year. And he would struggle with heroin for 5 years. He would overdose, I want to say 6 to 8 times.
Wow.
And he, not too long ago, passed away from a heroin overdose. And that's what's brought me to what I've been doing over the past 2.5 years, going out to high schools, middle schools, talking to students, student athletes in college about making healthy decisions. And in one sense, how to ask for help when you're going through things like my brother did of anxiety, social anxiety, if you're depressed, if you're stressed. And then another thing is I talk about how the choices you're making now, how they're going to affect you, not only now, but later in your life, and how it's not just easy to just say, I'm just going to stop doing that. So those are the two big things I harp on is how to ask for help when you're struggling in life, but also how the decisions you're making now will affect you moving forward in life.
Well, again, I'm so sorry for your loss, it's inspirational to me how you've taken that and decided to give something of your loss and spread that wisdom. I was a boys lacrosse coach for 15 years, and still play in an old man lacrosse league and whatnot. And I know there was literally I was playing in my old man league last night, and on the sideline, one of the guys he hadn't been around for a while, and somebody said, "Hey, where you been?" And he said, "Oh, I was in rehab for alcohol and coke." And, first, people weren't sure if he was kidding, but then we just said, "Hey, we're glad you're back and you don't necessarily need that." But it's hard because the culture around the sport of lacrosse, and I'm guessing it's similar with hockey, is a lot of substance abuse, a lot of drinking after games, doing things like that.
Mm.
When you're talking to athletes, what kind of reception do you get and what kind of pushback, or like, how do you help them to say if they are like, how do they know what's sort of a quote unquote healthy amount of use to like drinking, drug use, or things like that for these competitive athletes? Because sometimes you're talking to college hockey teams and things like that. So any thoughts you have about how you help them to figure out what's a healthy decision and what, like, is it total abstinence, or tell me a little bit about what your thoughts are there.
That's a great question. And, I haven't really gotten any pushback on it. No one's said to me, well, I drink this much, or
Mhm.
I feel this, or I've been told this. So, that's great. But, for me, I would just say, if that question ever does come up,
Mhm.
why, right? Why do you need to go out and drink?
Mhm.
What does it give to your life that's positive?
Mhm.
For me, when I make choices in my life, a lot of the times before I make the choice, I'll say, what is this giving to my life? How is this going to affect my life positively?
Mhm.
And for me, drinking doesn't give anything to my life. I mean, you hear a lot of these stories about how people didn't make healthy decisions, how people got into trouble, or someone just says, why did I make that choice? And decent amount of the times they had been drinking.
Mhm.
So for me, I always ask the question, why? Right?
Mhm.
Like, what's the reason? Can you not go out with your teammates on a
Mhm.
Friday and Saturday night after a game and have a good time without drinking, or even without smoking a little weed? I know some people may have that thought of, well, it's just weed, it's not a big deal. Do you really need to make those choices to have a good time, or to even take it a step further, deal with something that you're going through?
Mhm.
So for me, I just always ask that question, why, right? Like, what's the reason we need to do it? Because a lot of times it's funny when I talk to high schoolers and when I talk to college athletes, they'll come up to me and they'll say, I do it because my friends are doing it. I
Mhm.
do it because I want to fit in. I do it because it makes me feel good when I do it. And that's to me a problem when
Mhm.
somebody says it makes me feel good.
Mhm.
Because if you can't find a natural way to feel good, like going to the gym, going for a run, doing something you enjoy, and to feel good, you have to use a substance. Well, then for me, that's a red flag.
Absolutely. And a lot of times I think of drugs and alcohol being like the condiments of life, like ketchup, mustard, things like that, where if you have a really good steak and you put ketchup on it, you're kind of ruining that really good steak. And hopefully life, if you're living your life right and in a healthy way, your life is like that really good steak. It doesn't need anything else. And we're drowning it and we're losing the flavor. It's funny, that guy for last night, he was saying, I'm realizing now that without the substances, I'm golfing better. Like, I'm having, it's just more clarity in these relationships, in our romantic relationships and our friendships. So again, I love the way you're framing that, asking all the time, do I really need this? But I think you're right. For so many people, it's the inertia of what they've just been around. It's the culture of what they've been in. I know for your
Mm.
brother, I heard you on another podcast where you were saying he had to, like, when he came out of rehab, he was mostly hanging around with the family, not spending a lot of time with friends that he used to use with and things like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you feel like that's a big thing that people coming through substance abuse treatment really need to find supportive, sober people to be with?
Yeah.
Or
Let me just really quickly just go back to what we were just talking about.
Mhm.
A phrase I always like to say when I talk to athletes and student athletes before I dive into that question is
Mhm.
the scariest thing about addiction
Mhm.
is that when I'm talking to them, I say, right now, nobody in this room has any idea who will suffer from this in the near
Mhm.
future or later in their life. That's the scariest thing, right?
Mhm.
Like my brother didn't start drinking that day because he's like, I want to become an addict. I want this to happen. And there have been people out there who drink their whole life. They drink a lot and they're fine. But
Mhm.
like the scariest thing is you don't know who that's going to happen to, right? So
Mhm.
that's important. Is you just don't like. There's a big misconception between high schoolers, middle schools, even college kids that well, that kid wanted to end up like that.
Mhm.
That kid had it. No, like that's not how it works, right? You don't know. That's the scariest thing. Nobody picks up a beer for the first time saying, I want to become an alcoholic. No one starts smoking for the first time saying, I want to become a drug addict. No, that's
Right.
not how it works. So I just think it's important to throw that in there. But yeah, to answer your question, yes, I do believe that when you're coming out of treatment recovery, you need to be around people who have the same aspirations, who
Mhm.
want to stay clean, who want that lifestyle. I'll never forget a quote. You could say it's a quote my brother said, and that is, we live in Massachusetts,
Mhm.
and in Massachusetts, there's a bridge that goes from the Boston area to the Cape. And my
Mhm.
brother lived on the Cape. And so Boston's here, the Cape is here, and
Mhm.
here's the bridge. And my brother said to me, Eric, there is nothing on the other side of that bridge, meaning where we used to live in Boston. There's nothing on the other side of that bridge that is here for me anymore.
Mhm.
So I don't need to be here anymore because basically saying all the people that I was hanging out with, those people who are still doing those things, I don't want to be there anymore because they're not going to help me. They're not going to, as I said, talking about making a decision that's going to give to you. They're not going to give to me, right? They're not going to help me in a way. I can remember him saying, I don't sit down at a table with people who don't give to my life anymore.
Mhm. Yeah,
So,
well, I was just gonna say, like, I literally was saying on my last podcast, if you wanna be a faster runner, you have to run with people who are faster than you. If you wanna become wealthier, you wanna hang out with people who are making more money than you. You want to surround yourself with the
yeah.
kind of people who are living aspirationally and again, or working out and getting stronger. If we're lifting weights, we wanna live with someone that's a little bit stronger than us. So that idea of finding these people, and again, it doesn't mean that people who are making bad choices are bad people.
No, no,
And
yeah, yeah. No, I agree for sure. That's a big misconception. Again, nobody wanted to, right? Nobody wanted to go through this, or even if it's just something else that they're doing in their life, that they may just be going through a moment in their life right now where there's been so much going on and they're just their emotions, right? When I talk about making healthy choices, talk about emotions. A lot of times, let our emotions make the decisions for us. And that's how people can end up in jail. Not to say they're a bad person, but this one night they let their emotions get the best of them,
Mhm.
right? And they made a choice. But no, you're 100% right.
When that's it speaks to me so much when you talk about the social anxiety of brother. I have a nephew who he's an alcoholic and he's sober right now, and I hope he maintains that. But that it started for the same reason, due to that social anxiety,
Mm.
and that alcohol can temporarily, as you've stated, it can cut off that self judgment feeling that we're getting. What do you wish if you had a time machine and could go back to Brendan and talk to him when he was 13 years old? What do you wish he would have done instead? And what do you tell kids to do who are feeling that social anxiety? What would be the better way you're encouraging young people to combat that?
Yeah. And it's a simple answer, but it's not easy. It's a simple answer. It's simple to do, but it's not easy to do. And that is to approach an adult he trusts
Mhm.
and to have the conversation. You just be honest. And this is what I talk about when I talk to students and athletes about asking for help. I talk to them about, okay, who to approach.
Mhm.
Approach a trusted adult. And notice I said trusted adult. I didn't say you have to go to your mom, you have
Mhm.
to go to your dad. because that is, I feel like when you have that conversation with your parents, it could have a little bit more weight attached to it because it's your mom, it's your dad,
Hmm.
and you're thinking to yourself, you really let them down, you're really embarrassed. There's a little bit more maybe shame in that. So it just an adult you trust, and that can be a teacher at your school, that can be a counselor at your school, that can be a coach of a sports team that you play on, it can be a friend's parents, but just an adult you trust. And then I would also say, you know, talking about what do you say, just being honest, being truthful, not beating around the bush. And this is hard. And just letting your emotions, your feelings out, and just letting them know what you're going through and how you're feeling in that moment. Just validating your feelings and emotions because they're real, they're not fake. And just talking about what you're going through. And I would have, and then another thing I talked to, students about, and I would have said to him is whenever you're feeling some sort of way, have a person you can talk to, right?
Hmm.
Have a person you can talk to, have a person that you can just call up and you know they're going to answer, right? We need that person who's going to answer the phone. Um so yeah, just that's a simple answer. Approach an adult, let the guard down, be vulnerable, and have that conversation about how you're feeling.
When I think now, and particularly after the pandemic, I think more adult men and athletes in particular, like Kevin Love and other people like that, are being more honest and vulnerable about
Yeah.
their anxiety. And we have more of these good role models to point to. I think when I was growing up, and I'm sure when you were growing up, there weren't as many examples of men who were saying, we all, as creatures, we have feelings. And
Yeah.
those feelings are nothing to be ashamed about. And they're supposed to be there to tell us about what's safe and what's not safe. And if your
Mm,
feelings are there and they're making you uncomfortable and they're stressing you out, that's to your point. There are trusted adults who want to help you with that. And as a school social worker myself, I can say, sometimes kids are nervous and they're wondering, well, are they going to tell my parents? Are they going to tell whichever else? Well, if you're not sure what to say, you can always ask that adult, whether it's your teacher or whatever, hey, if I tell you about something, how will you respond to it? And most of it, they're a teacher, they're a mandated reporter. They might have to say, well, if it's about child abuse, if it's about things like that, I'm going to have to tell somebody. Trusted adults don't keep secrets if it's unhealthy. But that being said, they're going to hopefully direct you to the right places to get help and support.
yeah, for sure. For sure. I agree with that. But, I would say this is that if you're going through a tough moment,
Hmm.
you talk to somebody at your school, whether it's a school counselor or a social worker, a principal, whoever it is, or a coach of yours,
Hmm.
and they tell your parents.
Hmm.
That isn't, I know it seems like it's a bad thing, but it's a good thing, right?
Hmm.
Because now your parents know that you're going through something and they can be there for you and they can comfort you and they can help you and they can support you. It's funny because when I talk at high schools and to some college sport players, but I would say mostly high school and middle school kids, they just feel like they don't have a trusted adult. It's
Hmm.
funny. So when I go and I talk to them, I say, if you feel like you don't have a trusted adult, come talk to me because that's what I'm doing here today. I'm here to help you. I'm here to, you know, help get you through this. Take that first step and ask for help. And a lot of times they'll come up to me and they'll say, I just don't feel like I have a trusted adult in my life.
Hmm.
I just don't feel like I can trust anybody with this conversation. So I think that's a big barrier us as adults we really need to do a better job of
Hmm.
is being adults in these kids' lives and they can trust us to have these conversations because I believe that if adults can become trusted adults to these kids, whether in high school, middle school, college, then a lot of what we're seeing out there gets solved. I'm
Hmm.
not saying all of it, but
Hmm.
I believe it's a huge piece to this whole thing. Because if my brother felt like he had a trusted adult, he doesn't reach for that bear in the refrigerator.
Hmm.
He's able to talk to my parents, and maybe he's alive right now.
Hmm. When I think a huge mistake that a lot of adults make when kids do come and talk to them is they'll minimize those kids' problem. They'll say, "Oh, I wish I was your age." Oh, I wish or that's just puppy love. Or what do you mean you have anxiety about that? It's no big deal. And
Mhm.
we have to be really careful when we're dealing with young people to not dismiss any of their feelings or anxieties, because for them, this is the first time they're going through it all. And so as adults, we're just listening, hearing what they have to say, and recognizing that even if it feels like, to us now, 10, 15, 20, 30 years later, it's not a big deal. To them right in that moment, it's a big deal. And them opening up to you, them giving you their trust is the biggest gift that anyone can give someone.
Yeah.
So any other tips you have for adults? So because people do reach out to you, any other things that you do to kind of make kids comfortable and make them feel like you're going to honor their feelings? Or any tips that you would give to adults about that?
And it's great you asked me that, because I wanted to maybe go over some of these things, because I also do talk to adults about how to be trusted adults. When I talk to schools, sometimes they'll say, well, can you talk to our parents or even our teachers? And a few things. One thing is, another reason why kids are concerned, afraid to approach their mother, father, or that adult in their life, that their guardian, is when they've gone to them about other things, they've yelled at them. They've yelled at them. And so if I've been yelled at about something, why would I go back to that adult and express something else? But here's the thing. This is what I've gotten. This is what I've realized. This is my opinion, but this is the reason why adults yell. It's not really because they're mad, they're pissed off, they're angry. It's because they're afraid. And in that moment, they don't know how to deal with it, because they're shocked, they're afraid, they're concerned, and they really care about that person, because that's their child, it's their grandson, whoever it is that their guardian, right? And so they don't know how to deal with it in that moment, and they just flip out and they say, oh my God, like, how could you do this? Why would you do this? And all you really need to do is change your tone and change how you react. Because I think it's really coming from a good place. It's coming from a good place, but the way that we react to it, it's giving off maybe a different message that we believe we're giving to them. So I think first off, understanding that you may want to kind of yell, but it's not coming from a bad place. It's coming from a good place. So just really, before you react, really think about, okay, what am I about to say? How am I about to say it? What is the message I'm about to give off to this young person who just opened up to me, who just did one of the hardest things they could do? What I'm about to say is so important, and how I'm about to say it, right? Another thing, too, I always talk about it to adults is understand that it is not the same time now as it was when you grew up. It is a completely different time. We didn't have social media. We didn't have Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, all this stuff. There wasn't as many stressors in life now as there was back then. It's just a completely different world. And so it's important that we understand that, and that when kids come to us with something that they're struggling with, that we don't say anything. We just listen. We listen to them with our ears. We don't do a whole ton of talking, because a lot of times what I notice with my parents and with other adults is they just want to talk. And because they're the adult, it's like, well, I'm the authority figure, right? So this is what you need to do. This is how you should feel. But it's important we just sit there, don't say anything, listen to them. Listen. And then when they're done talking, you kind of almost a sentence, right after that, a sentence or two, just repeat what they said so you can validate. If they go to you and they say, Dan, right now I'm really struggling. I'm so stressed out about, the grades I'm going to get, and I'm not doing so well in sports. And then once they're done talking, just saying, I completely understand that you're really stressed out about your sport, about your school, and not even really telling them essentially what they have to do, just talking to them about it, and just letting them unpack everything. So I just think it's really important to do those things, to not yell at them, to come at it with a soft tone, think before you're going to talk. to let them talk, to listen, to let them validate their feelings.
And I literally had a girl in my office today, and she was to piggyback on what you're saying. She was saying, I liked her mother cares about her tremendously. They have a good relationship, but she's like, I can't really tell my mother when I'm feeling depressed because she gets so upset about me being depressed. And her mom has a hard time just sitting with her and allowing her to just have her feelings. Sometimes as adults, we feel like we need to solve it for the kids. We need to give them an answer. And
That's
realizing that sometimes we don't need to give an answer. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give to someone is to just be with them in their emotions.
yeah, for sure.
And the research on helping kids to make better choices, and particularly with substances, does really suggest that when a kid has a trusted adult in their life that they feel would be disappointed if they found out that that kid had been using alcohol or using drugs, that's the number one reason why kids who don't use drugs or alcohol say that they don't use drugs or alcohol is because there's someone in their life that they look up to, some trusted adult who they feel like they might be disappointing if they did that. So again, as parents, we don't need to be perfect, or adults, teachers, and things like that. We just need to let these kids know that we believe in them, that we believe they're going to be healthier in the long term if they're filling their body, they're eating well, they're sleeping well, they're taking care of themselves, and not using substances is just a part of that. Is that what you're basically kind of telling families and kids when you're talking to them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you somewhat to that degree. I just think that too, that, it's to let them know that if they have used, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay if they have used. I always say to them, understand that it's okay not to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to be struggling. It's okay to be going through what you're going through. But at the same time, it's not okay to suffer with it and not talk about what you're going through with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But yeah, I do agree that they may be not making those choices because they'll let an adult down for sure. But for me, when somebody asks me a question, why didn't you go down the road you went down with your brother? Because for me, I hung out with my brother. I hung out with all those kids who my brother was hanging out with, and they were drinking, they were smoking, they were messing around with it. I didn't do. Why didn't I go down the same road they did? Not because I guess you could say, actually, in a sense, yes. I didn't want to let my parents down. So you're right about that, now that I think about it. But another big reason, too, is I believe if we have goals, if we have dreams and aspirations in our life, that's why I think it's so important, even at a young age as middle schoolers, to have goals. And I'm not saying when we talk about goals, you have to know where you're going to work when you get out of college. No. But even if it's just goals of the grades I want to get this year, or I want to make this team, whatever those goals are, they're important to have, because when you make decisions in your life, before you make a choice, asking yourself, all right, is this decision, is it going to help me to reach that goal? Is it going to bring me closer to it, or is it going to push me further back? So that's why I just think goals are so important, because you can align the choices that you're making with goals. And I'm not just saying it, you can have all sorts of goals. You can have family goals. You can have sport goals. You can have goals in school. But I just think that that's why it's so important to have goals. Because for me, mine was hockey. You talked about me being a hockey player. And so when my friends were making these choices, I said to myself, these don't align with my goals. These decisions, they don't align with the goals I want in life. And so it was hard for me, but I had to separate from them for a while, for a long time, because we were going down two different paths. We wanted two different things. And so, that was the big thing for me, was having a goal of playing hockey at the highest level I could.
Now, in addition to you've also been involved with the Heron Project and the Purple Cup. Do you want to speak at all about some of the other organizations that you've been connected with in your working with young people or whatnot?
Yeah. So it's a great organization, the Heron Project. If you haven't heard of it, his name is Chris Heron. He started the organization, and a little bit of background on him. Quick little story about what he does, and what he went through was, growing up, Massachusetts area, prolific basketball player, one of the best in the state, was probably going to get drafted in the NBA, gets a scholarship, goes to BC, and then he gets kicked out for using drugs. Goes to Fresno State, plays, struggles there off and on with drugs. Goes to rehab, gets clean, and then eventually plays in the NBA for a little bit, still struggling with his drugs, and eventually stops playing because he gets hurt in the game. And I'm pretty sure he got hooked on, pills pretty badly because he got hurt. And then he started going around the schools and speaking, kind of like what I'm doing. And so I've teamed up with them. I've worked with them on numerous occasions they have, what's it called? They have a week where they do all sorts of healthy stuff, and I have spoken for them virtually. I forget what it's called. Oh, I think Wellness Week. It's called
Okay.
Wellness Week, and so I've spoken for them, and then we've done. I haven't done it probably for over a year now,
Mhm.
but there's some great episodes on YouTube on the Purple Couch where me and Izzy, my co-host, we would hop on for about 20 minutes, and we just talk about things that were relevant to kids and helping them get through tough moments, and really situations that were relevant to what they were going through, whether it's high school, whether it's middle school. So you can just type in on YouTube Purple Couch Heron Project and a bunch of episodes will come up. But I mean, it's a great organization because they're really aligned with what I'm also doing too, and that is, to help youth make better choices to live substance free. And that is one of my goals, one of the goals that I have with what I do. So it's a great organization.
Yeah, thank you for bringing attention to that one. Last thing I want to ask you about is your brother had a couple of years of sobriety and
Mhm.
was doing a lot better before he had his overdose where you lost him. It's really incredibly hard, and I've talked about to the podcast listeners about losing my nephew when it was kind of unexpected. You and I have both. It seems like I've channeled. I deal with some of my grief by trying to do service, by doing this podcast, by doing other things like that. But any tips that you can give to people in helping support their family members, in helping when grief is kind of really unexpected like that, when we think somebody was doing better and then all of a sudden we lose them, to not get stuck in that I should have done this, I should have done that, or like any tips that you have in helping support family members who might be going through that kind of feeling when they've lost someone.
Yeah, for sure. So I would say first, the tip just for myself is know that it's not your fault because
Mhm.
I went through that. And when my brother passed away, I was depressed for months, saying those exact things. Oh, I should have, as I say when I speak to students, I didn't speak up. I didn't say anything.
Mhm.
I knew he was drinking in high
Mhm.
school when he shouldn't have been. I knew he was smoking. I knew he was using pills. I knew he was shooting heroin, but I didn't say anything. And so that killed me. I said those exact same words you just said. I
Mhm.
wish I could have did this. I could have, but just know that it's not your fault. Yeah, you
Mhm.
could have said something and maybe things would be different, but essentially you weren't the one that made that person make that choice.
Mhm.
So it's not your fault one bit. It's
Mhm.
not your fault at all. And when I realized that it wasn't my fault, when I realized that, I essentially, yeah, I could have helped him possibly, but I didn't really do to him what happened,
Mhm.
right? I wasn't to blame. And a lot of times people, that's almost what we're saying is I could have did this, I could have did that. We're blaming ourselves for what happened because we just feel bad and we're thinking to ourselves, well, we could have stopped it. But another thing that really helped me was talk to somebody,
Mhm.
right? There's a stigma around this, but talk to a psychologist,
Mhm.
talk to a professional about this and
Mhm.
open up. Because for me, and this is just, my opinion for myself, I just feel like talking about things.
Mhm.
It just lifts such a big weight off your shoulders and what you're going through and how you're feeling. Even if it's just sitting down and having a conversation about it helps tremendously.
Well, I always say, if we get a cut of any sort, the first thing we need to do is clean out the wound. And the way we clean out our emotional wounds is by talking about them. And
Yeah.
if we don't clean it's when we don't clean out the wounds that they become infected, and then they start affecting us for the rest of our lives. And so it can be, if we wait until things are infected, then it hurts so much more to clean it out. So the sooner after you have had an emotional wound, the sooner you can get yourself to, whether that's that trusted friend, a family member, or a professional, a therapist, or of something, get to your point, getting it out, cleaning out that wound. And it doesn't mean, just like when we clean out a wound, it doesn't mean you need to clean it out every day for the rest of your life. You clean it out, you put the bandage on it, you let it sit for a while, and then you come back to it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think another key point too here is so let's say you lost somebody, or
Mhm.
even let's say you're going through something. The biggest thing is to take that step and to talk about it.
Mhm.
And when I say talk about it, I'm not saying you got to sit there and just let it all out on the table right away. Some people can do that. And if
Mhm.
you can do that, great. But if you just walk into a counselor's office, you sit down or talk to a teacher and say, look, I'm really struggling right now. I'm just stressed out. And that's all you say. And maybe you talk to them about something else, but then you go in another time and you open up a little more. And then the next time you open up a little more, a little more, a little more. Then great. That's awesome. Like, that's progress. But we don't just want to put up the wall the whole time and not say anything. Eventually, right? We want to try to open up a little bit more every time, because when we open up a little more, I'll reference back to your cut. The healing on the cut starts to happen more and
Mhm.
more and more. But if we let the wall, we don't say anything, we don't talk about it, the cut never actually fully heals,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
So I think that's a big thing. Is a lot of people think, well, if I talk to someone right away, I have to talk about everything. But you don't. You go at the pace you want,
Mhm.
because you're the one that's going through whatever you're going through.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's your and it's a great point, because a lot of people going into therapy don't realize that you're the one in charge in there. You're paying for the time, so you get to decide the pace at which you talk about things. And if you don't like the pace at which the therapist is going at, if they're going too fast or too slow, you can tell them that. But just, like if you were getting a massage, if you don't say to the massage therapist, "Hey, that's too hard," or a little bit more there, you're not going to get what you want out of that experience. So you really need to
yeah,
tell your therapist what you want and need.
yeah,
Well,
for
Eric,
sure.
where can people find out more about you if they want to connect with you for speaking engagements or other things like that? Where should they look to find out more about you?
Yeah. So I have a LinkedIn. I'm on all socials. So Eric Daddario on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, on TikTok also too. My email is Eric, ERIC, at the decisionswemake.com. That's my email. And then my website is thedecisionswemake.com.
Yeah. And I'll put a
Those
link to that in the show notes for everyone
are
if they want to see. So,
awesome. Yeah. But those are the best places to reach out. You can DM me, you can message me, you can email me, go on my website, check it out. And yeah,
well, Eric, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. And for everyone who's listening, remember, if you have a question for Mariska or for me, email me at daniel.magler@live.com. And remember, do whatever it takes to get you through this world. You are just not allowed to die.